delighted to be with you today on this anniversary. Actually, both the 14th and the 16th can be counted because they took off the day between them, which was a Sunday. But they didn't finish all the work on the 14th. They went on, and you have the documents there, actually, of the first writings, the first orders and articles, William Pynchon called them, and he wrote the ending of it. He signed it. And he was not the secretary, but he affirmed it. And the people who signed on to be Springfield at that point have their names or their marks on the original document. Well, I thought I would begin with something that isn't here, that's missing, but you may remember it, and that is the mural now in the library across the street that used to be up there above the stage in the auditorium. We are actually in the cafeteria, but not far away. And it is a rather sentimental view of Mr. Pynchon coming to the valley with his hand pointing toward natives, and on the other side some educators, I suppose, with books and the like. And it is supposed to depict education coming to the valley. Okay, I guess you can do that if you want. So we'll start with the story. Two things stand out in William Pynchon's life. First, his achievements. First, extraordinarily remarkable relationships with native peoples. I will detail that for you. Second, a book, which became the first book banned and burned in Boston. You can't take that away from him. Here he is, William Pynchon. A portrait exists. We are very fortunate to have because he went back to England. No portraits were made in the colonies until after his time here. So at the age of 67, this portrait was painted and brought back to the United States, probably by his son, well, it wasn't the United States then, brought back probably by his son John after his death. He is wearing Puritan garb. He has a short round head haircut. The round heads were the anti-royalists in the Civil War in England. And he is wearing a black cap, which is to indicate his role as a magistrate, which he didn't have anymore, of course, after he'd gone back to England, but he carried that identity with him. He came from Writtle in Essex in England, which is near Chelmsford, not very far from London to the northeast. Writtle is kind of a picture book type of English town. The family had property and is indicated on a map in that area from that time, 1635, and I think it is now the Hound Pub in Roxwell. This is the parish church in Writtle, and the baptismal font where probably he was baptized as an infant in 1590. It is not certain he came from Writtle, but the whole family came from that area, and the Pynchon's cousins play a role in that neighborhood. But it wasn't too long, when he was a child, that his father moved the family to Springfield, England, which is the other side of Chelmsford, and lived in what was probably lived in what was the Springfield Barns Manor. These are fields today from the Springfield Barns Manor in Springfield, Chelmsford, England. There is a map which shows Mistress Pynchon's field on it, identified as such, 1620, and it is possible to find from the map where that is. Here are trees growing along Mistress Pynchon's field, and I particularly like the one on the right because I imagine it was there when Mr. Pynchon was present in the 1620s. This is the parish church in Springfield, All Saints Church. I believe there was a replica made in Springfield, Massachusetts, and called by the same name, but I do not know quite where it is. An Episcopal church in Springfield, All Saints Church.
Oh, there's one over here.
Yeah. But it was built somewhat like that, with that, reminiscent of that. He served as church warden of this parish during the Puritan era, and he played some role in improving things. This indicator on this set of words high up on the steeple, praise God for all the good benefactors, happens to predate his time, but he was a benefactor and the church warden of this parish. And there is a plaque in the balcony, in the belfry, that mentions him. You can see it here, William Pynchon. P-I-N-C-H-I-O-N. You can spell it P-Y-N-C-H-E-O-N. You can spell it P-Y-N-C-H-O-N. You can spell it almost any way you want. He spelled it P-Y-N-C-H-O-n. And so that tends to be what I've gone with. This has to do with some improvements made in the church under his time, and during his time as the church warden, as one of the church wardens. He is also in the records from that area, in the manorial court records of the Springfield. This is the other Springfield manor, Springfield Duke's Manor, for rental properties, I think. The Pynchons over there basically ran farms, rented farms, leased farms out. That was their major business. He was not a trader as he became in this country, but he must have done enough work in that area to have some rudiments of it, because he was very successful when he came here. So that wasn't their background. And this is his appearance at a manorial court, and his name is right there. It's in Latin and in English, and he paid up what he was supposed to pay. It wasn't very much, but under the English system, all the land belongs to the lord of the manor. You rent, but they had a system where you could kind of buy it. They didn't do that when they came to this country. That was one thing that got changed. In Chelmsford at the same time was, as one of his neighbors, Thomas Hooker, who was the Puritan lecturer in the major church. It is now a cathedral, but was not then. St. Mary's in Chelmsford. And Hooker will come into our story again because he went on, as you know, to found Hartford, Connecticut, and was very instrumental in all of the development of the valley below this area. So they lived about 3 miles apart. I think there was a backstory. Pynchon was active in the Massachusetts Bay Company. That was the whole, the corporation which sponsored the immigration to New England in 1630. Pynchon came with the 700 immigrants to that huge number for that time, all at once. Salem existed, but they came and created Boston and everything else from that 1630 immigration. And of course, the Plymouth colony existed, but this was the Bay Colony's beginnings. Here is his share in the venture, and for his 25 pounds, he gets to have some land, according to this document. He is mentioned in the Massachusetts Bay Charter, which was given by the king to a set of people, including William Pynchon by name. And the big story there is that they decided they would take the charter with them to Massachusetts, and they did. the English authorities rued that day and regretted that decision and kept writing saying, you know, why don't you send it back? We'd like to make some revisions. And Governor Winthrop said, forget about it. In however they said that in those days. It never went back. It's in Boston today, and it was the source of the authority for doing a lot of things. So that this is to remind us of the transatlantic crossing. I have to tell you, these are Dutch ships, but they're pretty close, and it's the right era. And 700 people on 7 passenger jet vessels, plus 4 other freighters, bringing the cows and the luggage and the baggage and food and everything else, arriving in June of 1630. Pynchon and his family moved then southward and settled in Dorchester, or now Quincy, and he did have property which included Squantum Neck, which is shown on the right, and which included some salt hay areas, marsh land. I don't know which exact acres belong to him, but it gives you a sense of the area that he first moved. His wife died very soon after arriving, and that left William with the 4 children, the youngest of which was John, who was at that time 5 years old. So Pynchon did what was the normal process at that time, and he remarried. He married Frances Stanford, and moved to this is the area right near there where Chickatawbut, the Massachusetts sachem, lived, right near Quincy Bay. And he bought land from Chickatawbut and moved to Roxbury, which should be spelled R-O-C-K, because that's what it's named after, a lot of rocks. And in fact, they rated the towns, set up the proper taxation system, and the Commonwealth said, you know this much money, and Pynchon objected, he wouldn't pay. He said, you've rated us wrongly, we can't grow anything here. He was fined instead. And he opened a store of considerably successful proportions. Here's some cloth you could buy from Pynchon's store in April 22nd, 1636. He is preparing to move in 1636, and in April, he's pretty nearly out of there, because it's May. By May, he's here. And so he's selling out. This is the fire sale. This is the going out of business sale from Pynchon's store. You could get violet or russet shag or murrey, which is a dark reddish purple russet. That's what he had on hand, 35 yards of this. And he was very much the merchant. This is another one of his items that he sold, the jaw harp. Now, I don't know that Pynchon actually sold this, but I will tell you the story. This was found by archaeologists on the retreat, the line of retreat from the burning of the mystic village in 1637, of disaster visited on the natives in the Pequots, in the Pequot War. And they found this jaw harp, among other things. And it is really quite small. It's a lot smaller than the ones that exist now. But everybody loved them. Indians loved them. And John Winthrop Jr., who was trading in New London, not very far from Mystic, bought 4 dozen of these. And I'm thinking, what is he doing with 4 dozen jaw harps in New London when there's not even a house there, hardly? Well, he's trading with them. And he's giving them in exchange to Indians. Is this one of those that made it along that retreat from the mystic village, or was this one carried by one of the British soldiers. I don't know, but it's kind of fun to come that close to moments and experiences. Jaw harps? Well, you put it between your teeth and twang the end of it. They are sometimes mistakenly called Jew harps. But it's about jaws. And that's what he did. That's what he had. The Indians love them. You can make boing, boing, boing noises. But the British loved them too. It was a shared passion. So here's our area. Now, you probably recognize this. I have to explain it to some people, but in 1635, the year before, we had the settling of the lower set of colonies, all from villages in eastern Massachusetts. In fact, originally they were named after the places they came from. Hartford was Newtown, or for Cambridge. Windsor was Dorchester, for Dorchester. And Wethersfield was whatever, I forget right now, but it's in the book. At the same time, Springfield, Pynchon was exploring out here, but he was, as you can see, quite a bit farther to the north of the rest of Connecticut. And anything beyond him are all native villages. This shows Warehouse Point, where Pynchon had his warehouse. Agawam was also where he had his store on Pynchon Point. That's the overall view, I'd say. Here is the beginning, shall we say. And I've been told I'm supposed to read from my book at some point. So I will. And you get some illustrations as well. Early May, 1636, 8 explorers nose their canoes westward into a tributary of the Connecticut. Paddling about half a mile up the tree-lined river, the native peoples call Waranoco. There we are. These pictures were taken in May, actually. Up the tree-lined river to the place the native peoples call Waranoco, to the place they called Agawam. A low-lying meadow there provided an open space on the river's southern bank. An oxbow of stagnant water defined this field on its landward side, tracing an ancient bend in the river that dated from when the Waranoco meandered along a long-forgotten prehistoric bed. On reaching their destination, the pioneers dragged their crafts up onto the muddy shore, unloaded their gear, and carted it into the lush green meadow. They had come to stay. The English had visited this particular place before. A colonist building already stood on the meadow. William Pynchon had identified the site the previous fall when he carried out preliminary exploration of the area. He was accompanied then by John Cable, John Woodcock, and an Indian interpreter. They had set up some sort of simple structure in the meadow, which the English ever after called House Meadow. How many of you have been there? It's there. Now, Pynchon went on to purchase Springfield. Interestingly, the document you have predates his purchase. He is planning ahead, but he must have talked about making a deal because he then bought land on both sides of the river. This map from early Springfield, a few years after what I'm speaking of now, was what intrigued me the most ever about the Pynchon story. Why did I get involved? I found it in a book in my uncle's attic in West Springfield. and I made a copy of this map. To think that this place with all of these buildings was once nothing but a tract of simple houses along the town street, the Hasaki Marsh, the State Street is right here. And in fact, sometime in the last century, in digging down close to Main Street, they actually found causeway pieces from this 1630s road that had been placed there, Corduroy Road. This would be the center, so to speak. The common would be right there. But there's not very much there, not at the beginning. That's a Hasaki Marsh, but of course it's not the one that was there. It gives you an idea of what kind of land they were dealing with. A sandbar with this Hasaki Marsh to the right and the river to the left as you're looking north. And the property went down to the Mill River. Mill River became an important part of the enterprise because they did build a mill on it and were able to cut wood at a sawmill there. There was built a meeting house, which was for both civic meetings and for church meetings. I have this picture of a copy of the Simsbury, Connecticut one, because the Springfield one had 2 turrets on it, and that's very rare. I think the Simsbury people copied that when they built their own buildings somewhat later. And this is Warehouse Point, where, as I mentioned, Pynchon had his storehouse, the highest navigable point on the Connecticut River. After that, you're carrying things because of the cataracts, the waterfall. There's the map from that era, more or less, and it shows Mr. Pinzer's Handel House, his storehouse. It's a Dutch map, which I think was actually there. Springfield would be on that side. And it shows Mr. Pinzer's, and the Kleine is the waterfall, Warehouse Point. And it shows the other settlements, including Harfort for Hartford, and Wethersvelt for Wethersfield. Windsor? Yes, it has Windsor. W-Y-N-S-E-R. And, of course, the Dutch name, Fort of Good Hope, which was exactly on the site of Hartford, where they had traded, but they got outfoxed by the English immigrants, and so that was the end of their operation there.